What is up, YouTube? Bobbles and Ball Cards back with another video. Hope everybody's doing good today. Coming off of yesterday's video with, obviously the announcement of Peter resigning from SGC and kind of sharing my thoughts on that. Listening to the interview that Neo did with PSA and some of the stuff that came out from that, and specifically talking about where collectors is wanting to, I guess you would say, kind of downscale SGC at, and where the position that they want to get them to. I thought it would be interesting to take a look back at over the last few years and actually kind of put into numbers the rise that SGC had. And then I also, obviously this isn't going to be 100% accurate because for this year, I can only use the halfway mark and then kind of say they were on a pace. But I wanted to look at how significant of a decline do they need to get to potentially be back into that 2017-ish, 2018 range of grading. And so I see Neo did a video this morning kind of discussing what does the grading landscape look like who's gonna take over as number 2 or whatever. And realistically, I don't know that you can accurately predict that, even because we don't know the future. If I had to roll the dice and guess, I would say that CGC has the best opportunity. However, they kind of exploded when they came onto the scene, and then they've made these changes and tweaks along the way, and I just don't know that the position that they're in currently, if they could grasp enough of the landscape to be significant. One of the biggest advantages SGC had was the turnaround time. That was honestly the biggest attraction for people using them. And then you had the folks that liked the tuxedo look. You had the folks that just appreciated or felt like they were the more accurate or more consistent of grading. So they had, a few things going for them, but overall I would say if you ask people why they chose SGC, I would expect many of them would say the fast turnaround time, because no other company really has been able to offer and sustain the turnaround time like SGC was doing. So, if CGC can't, if they're running on a parallel or similar turnaround time, it would be hard outside of people that just absolutely won't use PSA. It would be hard for them to capture much growth, because when it comes down to it, if you had to make the choice and they're running similar, obviously CGC is going to be a little bit cheaper to grade with, but there is a huge impact on the resale value. Now, SGC started off that way, so and obviously they grew. So I'm not saying it can't happen, but it would be a very tough uphill battle at this point. So, but anyway, I'm not here to talk about who is going to be the number 2 or whatever. I also want to mention, I want to clarify some things, because I had some discussions with folks after the video. I spoke to John Newman, I spoke to Ryan, I've spoke to several people. At this moment, I am going to go with believing what Hoge said, and I still see a use case for SGC to a small point. You're going to have people that would still use them. My thought, so I'm not at the place of SGC is closing, but I am at the place that these announcements and continuously piling on this, and the fact that we now 100% officially know that, when I said earlier, when they stopped the bulk submission discount, that they don't want your cards, to hear that they want to scale it down as far as they do, that resonates even more. They literally don't want your cards. So the impact that it's going to have, the biggest, part of, is going to be, I think, the transactions. The transaction phase is going to be impacted because we still have that question mark overhead. I could sit here and say I don't think they're going to close them, but that's like still questioning it. We can't say confidently that they're not going to. We can say I don't think that they're going to. So I think with that, that part of it, the questions that remain there, you're going to see some difficulty in the liquidity of the slab. You're going to see some price, reductions, and I think your mainstream vintage, your popular vintage in SGC will do fine. It's more towards the newer stuff, where people were using them because they could get the stuff back, get it on the market in a slab, and it made the transactions nice. It kind of helped with some of the recouping costs on like wax or whatever. So that part of the game I think is going to be hit the most, but it's still early in the whole phase. This is a transition. You could maybe look at it as a rebuild, but in a negative way. And so we'll just have to see how things go. But I wanted to look at, what does that look like? What does it look like? How much impact would need to be decreased to get them in that 17, 18, 19 range? And so I'm going to start here. And this all is coming from GemRate on Instagram. So this is an old post. I mean, this was January 4th, 2022. So we're talking 3.5 years ago here. But they posted this, and it said, as of January 1st, 2022, and this showed the items graded by PSA, Beckett, and SGC. CGC wasn't fully in the game yet, especially with sports, which also I want to mention, the numbers that I'm going to share with you guys is only sports. I'm not looking at the TCG side, because we're looking at the impact for SGC in the sports market, because obviously they don't do a lot of TCG anyway, so they could go to 0 on TCG, and it's not going to be a significant change there. So, but as of January 1st, 2022, you had PSA at 37.9 million through their lifespan. Beckett was at 8.3, and CGC came in at 3.5 million. So that was really interesting to see, the entire existence, which, what would that be? Probably, give or take 30 years, at least 25 years. I think SGC came around in the early 90s, but it's escaping me the actual date. So I'm going to call it like between 25 and 30 years. They had done 3.5 million. Now, I don't know. I don't expect, but I don't 100% know if when SGC became a standalone entity and broke away from Certified Collectible Group, which is obviously the company that owns CGC, I don't know that the pop report got reset. So I would assume that this is in the entire existence, even when SGC was under the Certified Collectible Group umbrella, would account for the 3.5 million. So, all right, let's go ahead here. And I broke down year by year here. And again, this isn't going to be 100% accurate down here because things are obviously changing. But we can look at 22, 23, 24, and then a projected pace for 25. And look at, so PSA was at 7.4 million for 2022. Again, that's only sports. SGC came in at 919,000, CGC 635,000, and BGS at 507. This is what's interesting, because CGC came out the gates really, really strong. And then again, like I said, they got behind. They made some tweaks to the grading scale. They changed the label. Then they changed the entire name. They went from CSG to CGC. Like, it's been a lot of changes in a short period of time. They have settled in, I think, to where they want to be. But now it's a matter of getting people back on board where, initially they had a pretty strong showing, but I think they lost some of that momentum because of all the changes they made. There's still a chance that they could pick it back up because they do have a nice slab. People, the grading people argue, but they didn't come in just fresh. They had some experience that overhauled from Beckett into CGC. So there is some experience there. They are, they're well respected in pretty much all other categories that they do. They're tops in comics. They do well with TCG. They have the video game, the VHS. They have the currency, both coin and paper and everything. They have a worldwide presence because they have offices overseas and everything. So they have a chance to establish themselves in the sports card market. It's just the sports card market is possibly one of the weirdest ones in the collectible space. So will people, accept them and go back on board? Who knows? That'll be to be determined. But anyway, moving forward to 2023, we've seen PSA at 7.2 million. So they kind of stayed stale. They dropped 200,000 there. SGC grew by about 200,000, and they came in at 1.1 million. Beckett dropped and CGC dropped. Then in 2024, PSA had a rise. They were at 9.1 million in sports for 2024. SGC was at 1.72, so again, they had a pretty good growth. And then Beckett, they dropped, and CGC dropped. So you can see how these trends are going up to this point. Now, looking at 2025, this is the first 6 months. PSA at 3.75 million, SGC at 914,000. What's interesting to me here is you can see in just a short period of time, SGC virtually doubled what their volume was, because in 2022 they had 919,000. In 6 months of 2025, even with all the question marks out there, they still were able to do 914,000. So they had in this period pretty much doubled their capacity, their ability, their volume, their everything. Now, just to say same pace, what would they look like at the end of 2025? Things are obviously going to change, but if we went with these numbers, you would have PSA sitting at 7.5 million. Now, that's significant because that puts them back up here at their 2022-2023 numbers, and a pretty significant drop over their 2024 numbers. Do I think this has anything directly related to demand of PSA sports cards? No. Personally, I think this might be more of them having so much TCG and the rise in that market that they had to adjust and manage the staff and where the volume was coming from. And so they said, all right, we were at 9.1 over here. We're going to take that and move it over to the TCG side. And they're staying still, at the 7.5 mark, but they've risen over in the TCG and it grew that number. So since I'm not showing those numbers, you're not going to really see that reflection. But if I had to guess, it was a management decision, not a demand or volume decision. It was just they, instead of hiring on and trying to add to the grading pool, they just adjusted where the graders went. Now this comes into play with them trying to, increase by opening the Florida office, taking SGC staff. Maybe they think that by doing that, they can balance the sports and the TCG, and we might see that number on the back half now of 2025 actually grow to get them back up to the 9.1 million. That's to be determined. I don't know that taking SGC staff, even if they took the whole staff, I don't think it would be enough. Looking at what SGC is doing, would it be enough to account for a 1.6 million drop in 6 months? I don't know. I don't see that, but I think that is part of why the shifting around. Basically, PSA stole from themselves. They took from the grading pool and put it over into TCG, and now they're trying to replace that with SGC staff. So we'll see how that goes. Now, SGC would be up to 1.82, which would give them another 100,000 rise if they sustained this number. Now, actually, that's going to drop. We know that. At first, I thought I did my math wrong. But that's going to drop just by what we've heard, just by the transition that's going, just by knowing that the staff's going away, all of that. That number is going to drop. But I wanted to kind of give an example of where they would have been at. So CGC, it says they'll be up 434, putting them at 712,000. That would be the most they did out of all of these years. Now, they are supported by repackers. They did those 100,000 Otanis or whatever it was. So that's going to inflate their number a bit. Does that help them? Does that help them get more traction? Who knows? Again, my personal opinion, their biggest thing is they need some bulk submissions. They need some bulk submitters. I think that really helped SGC grow when they expanded. I was doing it since 2020. A few other folks were doing it since 2020. I think there might have been a couple pre-2020. But overall, I really think when SGC started to blossom and grow was when they started opening up and shops were submitting, and you heard about all these bulk submitters everywhere. I think that is really what helped them grow in the demand. It also helped them efficiency-wise because processing large orders is obviously much easier than getting a bunch of small orders in. So I think if CGC could grow in that space and up their bulk submission game, that could help them. And then hopefully with that, they could grow in numbers, but also it would help them maybe be more efficient. And then, they could take a little bit of the chunk of the market there, but that's to be determined. Beckett's numbers would be down 25,000, so they would be coming in at 302,000. So that shows you the growth over the years here of where all of the companies either, they've been stale or they've grown. SGC by far has grown the most out of the sports market. So here is numbers here of how much they've done in terms of overall numbers. And you have PSA at 31.2 million. You have SGC at 5.6 million, might as well call it. CGC at 1.9 million and Beckett at 1.5. Now, the reason I did this is to go back over here. There's only one company here that matched their entire lifespan, and that was SGC. And they didn't only match it, they crushed it. They've done over 2 million more cards since 2022 than they had done their entire existence up until 2022. So that is a massive growth. Obviously PSA came in pretty strong here with 31, but they were still under that 37.9. But 31 million in just a couple years versus 37. This also speaks to the growth of grading overall. It's way bigger than it used to be. So that's something to take note of there, but that's the numbers since 2022. All right, the next slide before I put it up here, this is going to talk about kind of looking at how much of a negative impact does SGC have to take to get them back into that 17, 18, 19, role there. And I'm going to tell you guys before I even show this, it is very significant. So what I did here is I based it off of this number, the 1.82, and I just did it on a percentage base, okay? So if they take a 33% cut, a 33% reduction, overall they would have been, they'd be on pace for 1.2 million cards. On a 50%, it would be 910,000. 66% would put them at 600,600. 75% down to 455,000. 80%, 364,000. And if you go all the way to 90% reduction, it drops them to 182,000. Now, we go back over here and look at this. You know, Beckett in the first half is 151,000, 302,000. You know, if we keep them in line with Beckett, it's going to be an 80% reduction. But when we look back at how many cards SGC had graded up until 2022, I think it's actually below this number. Like if they want to get back to 17, 18, 19, I think it's below this number. I think it's probably below 150,000 cards, and that's annually. So you're looking at a 90% reduction. Now, do I realistically think that 9 out of 10 cards that were going to the company are no longer going to go there? No. Like, I don't think that's realistic. But then it begs to question if that's truly what Collectors Universe / PSA, however you want to identify them, if that's truly the target for them, then comes the question, what are they going to do to squeeze out the numbers? Like, to choke hold and continuously decrease the numbers. That's the part that is an interesting question. Do they raise prices? Like, do they say, okay, we're still getting more than we want, so let's make money off of it. Let's make some more money. We're going to raise the prices up, see how the people submitting react. Is it going to be a turnaround time thing? You know, they're already like twice as much, which still isn't much when you look at a 5 to 10 day. 20 business day is a month, you know, realistically. So, you know, are they going to try to even increase that more because the staff is going to be so small? Those are the questions that I'm most curious to see. How do they slim the cut? Like, how do they cut the fat off going from, you know, a pace of 1.82 million to back pre-COVID numbers? Like, what plans do they have here to go that far, that deep in the hole? And, you know, thinking about this, and obviously Peter didn't really share reasoning or anything, but if I was the CEO of a company, or even an employee of the company, and I was motivated, worked my ass off to hit and reach goals that people didn't believe in, people didn't believe could happen, but have the faith and the work and the drive to do it. And then there's a change in ownership or change in, you know, who says what goes. And I hear, well, we want to rewind this. We think it's great what you guys did, but we want to take all of that away. What you did over the last 5, 6, 7 years, whatever, that's going to be irrelevant now. We're going to just sweep it all away, and we're going to put you back at square one. And if you really think about it, you know, the number that was first thrown out is 2017. And Peter's message, he said 7 years. So 2017 to 2024 is 7 years. They literally are based, you know, they're saying from their own mouth, we want to wipe out everything that Peter did. In a sense, in a, you know, the way, if you think about it that way. I would be pissed too. I would. So some people are thinking that he was forced out, which I guess you could call this maybe that. But I really think, you know, if it was me, even if I wasn't forced out and I was hearing this, I would be like, hell no. I worked too hard. I had too much pride. I had too much, you know, he probably worked some late nights to try to figure out, you know, how to do things and manage things, especially through the pandemic, to manage and navigate that whole thing. You know, that was a shitstorm and a half. And to say, oh, nope, we're going to take our eraser and we're going to wipe everything off that dry erase board and it's back to 2017. I'd be like, no, hell no, I'm gone. So can I blame him for leaving, whether it was forced or whether it was personal decision? Absolutely not. That would suck. that would be like some, a cake decorator making this massive, 7-tier cake, and somebody coming in and just smashing it and saying they didn't like it. All that hard work, all that time, effort, everything just gone. I'd probably just throw an apron or whatever down and walk out. Like, I don't know. It had to be hard for him. And maybe maybe he got compensated. I don't know. I really don't know any of the details there. But I was just thinking in my mind, if I was him and hearing that everything that he had really, he was very passionate about and made sure that he was sending everything in the right direction, up, positive, duplicating numbers. It was very impressive. I wouldn't want to see all of that go to waste either. So, but there you have it. I mean, this I just thought was kind of fun to look at, like, where do they have to drop? How far do they have to drop? And what do those numbers look like based on the first half of 2025, and assuming that they would have continued the same pace throughout the rest of the year? Obviously, that is not the case. I want to stress again, I'm not saying the company is going away. I'm not saying the brand is going away. I am just saying that there will likely be some hesitancy. There will likely be some negative impacts, some pretty strong negative impacts overall in the market space. The liquidity, the value, the trust in whether or not the brand stays or goes, that's still a big question mark. And so I think it'll be difficult for folks who are grading and trying to sell the slabs. So it'll be interesting to see. I say the next 6 to 18 months will be fun to keep an eye on and watch and see where things go. But to look at this and say, well, to get them back down to 17, they need to, 9 out of 10 cards can't go there. I'm really curious how they're going to stop that. I mean, if the SGC truthfuls really wanted to say F you, they could just bombard them with cards and be like, hell with you. You want us to go away. You want us to die off. We're not going to let it. Just send them a ton. So I doubt anyone's going to do that, but it would be kind of funny. But anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. Hope you have a wonderful Friday. If I don't do a video before now and next week, hope you have a wonderful weekend. If you don't mind, comment below. Let me know your thoughts. And as always, guys, stay safe, stay healthy, and until the next video, I'm out.